No matter how they tried, the disciples could not persuade him to give further explanations. At the lake shore, he went from boat to boat. All were drawn far up on land and fastened tightly with chains. Not until he had wandered far into the city's outskirts did he find one that hung loosely on a rope and could be untied. He cast it loose. Far out in the lake, he drew in the oars. The time had come, and he was content. His little boat, that was it, was his small, limited, artificially guarded life. But the expanse of grayness all around was the world, was the universe and God. It was not hard to let himself drop into that. He sat on the edge of the boat with his feet dangling into the water. Slowly he leaned forward, until the boat behind him slid briskly away. He was in the universe. Into the small number of moments he continued to live, far more experience was packed than into the 40 years in which he had been on the way to this goal. It began this way. At the moment he fell, when for the fraction of a second he hung between the edge of the boat and the water, it came to him that he was committing suicide. The pathos of wanting to die and the pathos of dying itself coalesced within him. It amounted to nothing. It was all so simple, all so wonderfully easy after all. There were no longer any abysses, any difficulties. The whole trick was to let yourself go. That thought shone through his whole being as the result of his life. Let yourself go. Once you did that, once you had given up, yielded, surrendered, renounced all props and all firm ground underfoot, once you listened solely to the counsel in your own heart, everything was gained. Then everything was good. There was no longer any dread, no longer any danger. Wonderful thought, a life without dread. To overcome dread, that was bliss, that was redemption. How he had suffered from dread all his life, and now, when death already had him by the throat, he no longer felt it. No dread, no horror, only smiles, release, acceptance. He did not think this as one thinks thoughts. He lived, felt, touched, smelled, and tasted it. He tasted, smelled, saw, and understood what life was. He saw the creation of the world and saw the downfall of the world, like two armies moving in opposite directions, never stopping, eternally on the march. The world was constantly being born and constantly dying. All life was a breath exhaled by God. All dying was a breath inhaled by God. In the grey darkness of the rain above the nocturnal lake, the drowning man saw the drama of the world mirrored and represented. Suns and stars rolled up, rolled down, choirs of men and animals, spirits and angels stood facing one another, sang, fell silent and shouted. His life lay before him like a landscape with woods, valleys, and villages that could be viewed from the ridge of a high mountain range. Everything had been good, simple and good, and everything had been converted by his dread, by his resisting, to torment and to complexity, to horrible knots and convulsions of wretchedness and grief. There was no woman you could not live without, and there also was no woman with whom you could not have lived. It was blissful to live, it was blissful to die as soon as you hung suspended alone in space. Water flowed into his mouth and he drank. From all sides, through all his senses, water flowed in, everything dissolved in it. He was being drawn, breathed in. Beside him, pressed against him, as close together as the drops of water, floated other people. His wife, his father, his mother and sister, and thousands of others. The pictures and buildings as well, Titian's Venus and Strasbourg Cathedral. Everything floated, pressed close together in a tremendous stream, driven by necessity faster and faster, rushing madly, and this tremendous, gigantic, raging stream of forms was racing toward another stream just as fast. Racing just as fast, a stream of faces, legs, bellies, animals, flowers, thoughts, murders, suicides, written books, wept tears, dense, full children's eyes and black curls, and fish heads, a woman with a long, rigid knife in her bloody belly, a young man resembling himself, a face full of holy passion that was himself at the age of 20. How good that this insight too was coming to him now, that there was no time, that man is separated from all he craves only by time alone, this crazy invention. The universal stream of forms flowed on, the forms inhaled by God, and the other, the contrary forms that he breathed out. Klein saw those who opposed the current, who reared up in fearful convulsions and created horrible tortures for themselves, heroes, criminals, madmen, thinkers, lovers, religious. He saw others like himself being carried along swiftly and easily in the deep voluptuousness of yielding, of consent, blessed like himself. Out of the song of the blessed and out of the endless cries of torment from the unblessed, there rose over both universal streams a transparent sphere or dome of sound, a cathedral of music. In its midst sat God, a bright star, invisible from sheer brightness, the quintessence of light, with the music of the universal choirs roaring around in eternal surges. Now Klein heard his own voice. He was singing with a new, mighty, high, reverberating voice. He sang loudly and resoundingly, sang God's praise. He sang as he floated along in the rushing stream, in the midst of millions. He had become prophet and proclaimer. Loudly his song resounded. The vault of music rose high. Radiantly, God sat within it. The streams roared tremendously along.